the night shift, the hallways breathed like a tired animal, and I learned to read the way sorrow moves in quiet rooms. That is how I began to notice her. She moved softly, like someone carrying a box marked fragile that no one else could see. Her badge said Lena, but what spoke louder was the hush that followed her, the way her shoulders held an invisible winter. She checked vitals, adjusted blankets, smiled in the way people do when their own lungs are low on air. Grief sat on her chest like a sleeping cat, light enough to ignore for a moment, heavy enough to never forget. The first time I saw Mr. Caldwell with her, the air changed. He was one of those rare patients whose presence steadied the room. He had a stillness that did not deny pain, yet refused to bow to it. Lena stood by his bed with that careful smile, and he watched her not as a nurse, but as a person who had lost something and kept showing up anyway. The monitors hummed their steady hymn. Night stretched long and silver. She charted quietly while he dozed, and I noticed her hands. They trembled only when she thought no one was looking, a small tremor like a leaf deciding whether to fall. There are days in a hospital that arrive heavy with endings. Lena had collected too many of them in too short a time. Her mother's absence followed her like a shadow that did not understand visiting hours. In the cafeteria, the steam from the coffee rose and disappeared, and she watched it as if it were a lesson, as if vanishing could teach her how to go on living. She did her work with precision, but her tenderness felt rationed, measured out like scarce medicine. When families asked impossible questions, she softened, yet afterward she would pause in the supply room and hold the shelving like a railing on a moving train. What I remember most from those early nights is the silence between Lena and Mr. Caldwell. It was not empty. It was made of the kind of quiet where truth finds room to breathe. He would gaze at the small rectangle of night beyond the window, and she would follow his eyes, as if the dark held a map she had misplaced. I watched from the doorway sometimes, a witness to a conversation that did not need words, and I felt something shift, small as a syllable. The weight in her posture did not disappear, but it loosened a notch, as if a knot had been persuaded rather than forced. The night kept moving, the machines kept singing, and somewhere inside that unremarkable hour, a door in her seemed to click, not open yet, but unlocked. The night Mr. Caldwell spoke, his voice was steady, but thin, like paper that has been folded too many times. He told Lena that the trick to surviving the hard days was not to chase away the dark, but to notice the light that still lived alongside it. He asked her to try something for him. Write down one thing each day that felt like a light, no matter how small. She almost laughed. The request seemed too simple for the weight she carried, but his eyes held the kind of certainty that made refusal feel like closing a door you might later wish you'd walked through. The first days, her list was reluctant. A fresh pot of coffee in the staff room, a child's giggle somewhere down the hall, a warm scarf on a cold walk to her car. Small things that seemed almost too ordinary to matter. Yet as the days blurred together, she began to notice how often these moments arrived uninvited, how they found her even when she wasn't searching. She realized she had been living with her gaze fixed on the cracks in the wall, blind to the sunlight spilling through them. One morning, after a particularly long shift, she stepped outside to find the world washed in early winter light. The air was sharp, the kind that wakes you more than coffee ever could. She stood there longer than she meant to, breathing in a quiet that felt like it belonged only to her. Later, she wrote in her notebook, "The sky was so clear it felt like forgiveness." Weeks passed and Mr. Caldwell's condition worsened. The night he slipped away, Lena found a note on his bedside table addressed to her. It was short, written in a hand that trembled, but did not waver. "Thank you for sharing your light with me." She sat with it for a long time, the edges of the paper soft beneath her fingers. For the first time in months, her tears felt like they were watering something instead of drowning it. After that, she kept writing her daily lights, not as a task, but as a habit that had rooted itself deep. She no longer waited for the dark to pass before living. Instead, she learned to carry the light with her, small but steady, through every shadow. And though grief never truly left, it began to feel less like a weight and more like a place in her heart where the light could rest. Life will hand us seasons when the dark feels endless. In those times, the mind will tell us to wait for better days, but the heart knows we cannot afford to stop living while we wait. Light is not something that finds us only when skies are clear. It is something we choose to carry, moment by moment, even when the road is dim. And when we practice noticing it, we learn that it was never far away. If this story touched you, share it with someone who might need a little light today, and join us for more tales that warm the soul.